The Springboks are in the box seat for the Rugby Championship, despite a win over Georgia that even the boss, Rassie Erasmus, and the captain, Siya Kolisi, admitted probably wasn't up to scratch in terms of handling and consistency. However, I'm not entirely shocked. The Springboks have really rotated through a gigantic XL squad in this series against Italy and Georgia. You were always going to have a little bit of a disconnect. I actually reckon the thing that Rassie will be happy with is the work-ons are very clear. And what I have seen in this series is a foundation for success in the Rugby Championship. Now, this isn't some voodoo Kiwi mind trick where I'm trying to damn you guys with faint praise and, set the stage for an All Blacks victory. Of course, I do think the All Blacks can absolutely win the Rugby Championship. But just at the moment, my spidey sense is tingling, and I'm going to go over some of the reasons that I think the Springboks are well placed for this year's championship. Well, firstly, Georgia was dogged but limited opposition. However, in the preview for this game, I did say the one area you're not necessarily going to bamboozle them is in the scrum and at the rolling maul. And we saw that. The Georgians scored the opening try in Mombella. It was a beauty, a terrific rolling maul. Look, these guys are so nuggety. I mean, the low center of gravity, if you look at the bodies of some of these Georgian forwards, they are absolute hulks built close to the ground. They look like they were genetically engineered in a science lab for a rolling maul. And sure enough, they did splinter the much vaunted Springboks defense surprisingly easily. That was a little bit of a wake-up call for the Boks, and it was kind of smoother sailing later on. But honestly, 30 minutes into the game, I want to say the Boks were only leading by 5 points. Now, that wasn't on most people's bingo cards. Ultimately, the South Africans retorted with rolling mauls and scrum power of their own. And look, any concerns about the rookie front row being overawed were completely dashed. Bowen Venter had a good game. Van der Merwe picked up 2 tries. So Rassie has really built some depth there, and I think it was a calculated decision to roll out newbies en masse in the front row against Georgia, a team that was never really going to beat South Africa at home, with all due respect. The Lelos from Georgia, they just eventually withered under the relentless grinding forward play from the South Africans. I do want to single out Ran Nortka as well. I thought he had a good game, not just solid in his core duties, but also pretty handy around the park. Got his mitts on the ball, some nice soft hands in midfield, popping the ball up, keeping the Springbok attack alive. But here's my main area of critique, but also upside potentially for the Springboks. I just don't think your attack is firing on all cylinders at the moment. I think it's a big work on. Clearly, the notion of the South Africans playing 10-man rugby is a deeply antiquated one. These guys want to play with width, but something is breaking down in that journey from the quick ruck ball that you guys are winning, particularly with Pieter-Steph du Toit rumbling in there pretty hard all day. Just getting it out to the wide channels, it seems to be breaking down somewhere, which does surprise me because Grant Williams is absolutely sensational. This week I learned how much you guys love him. I was clearly operating on outdated data that there were any question marks about this guy. Probably comments I've heard in the past related to when he was injured, but clearly the number one halfback in the Republic now, even with Faf de Klerk turning back the clock with a good performance off the bench. And you have Canan Moodie, who just has such a high rugby IQ, has really been revelatory in this series. I know South Africans know and love him, but I think the world took notice of him in this series, might be pushing Jesse Creel out. And then you just have Apalele Arendse, of course. You have the other Van der Merwe on the wing. These guys want to run into space, and you're just not finding the space right now. Part of it, I think, was a rare misfiring performance from Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu. If I had to target one thing. Now, it did turn out that he had a bit of a hip pointer issue that flared up before kickoff. There was even talk of Rassie pulling him from the team. Clearly, it affected his goal kicking. He's normally a fairly reliable sharpshooter with the kicks. I think he made 1 from 5. But I just think that any kind of hip or glute complaint is also going to affect your running game. It might just shave a nanosecond off your reaction time if you're feeling a bit gingerly, if you're favoring that. So I thought it was an off-color performance from Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu. Got the job done, don't get me wrong. But by his pretty lofty standards, and you guys know I rate this guy, I just don't feel it was one of his best. The injury could have played a role in that. And so I think that did hamstring the outside backs at times. And look, the other thing that Rassie has admitted is the time of rotation and experimentation is over. Yes, you can get away with it against Georgia, against Italy. You're not necessarily going to want to do that against the All Blacks and Argentina. A little bit more continuity and consistency at 9 and 10 would help. And look, you've got all the cattle there. I mean, Mani Lebok, Andre Pollard, who scored a try off the bench, obviously Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu. Someone needs to start getting the lion's share of the minutes and just start every game at 10. I think that will do a lot for the continuity and stability of the Springbok backline attack. And some of these little clunky things where it's kind of breaking down, I think that could go into the rearview mirror with just a little bit more continuity of selection. You know, on the other hand, I do want to shout out Georgia for their rabid defense. Probably the technique isn't as good as you're going to see from the All Blacks and Argentina in the championship, and even the Aussies when they're on song. But man, I mean, no shortage of heart and physicality. They came up pretty hard and fast in the line. They did knock the Boks back behind the advantage line on occasion. And so it just shows that even the mighty Springboks can miss a step if you get up in their face. And that's really the challenge for the All Blacks, is matching that physicality of the Springboks, hitting them hard on defense. Easier said than done. So rather than critiquing the Springboks, I'm going to say this is an opportunity for you guys, and that is the breakdown. And it surprises me saying that looking at this series. Obviously, the Italians gave you guys a bit of a tickle up in that second half in the first game against Italy. Really made life tough at the breakdown. And look, the Azzurri are the most improved team in the world at hitting the breakdown at speed and with accuracy. But looking back at some of the stats here, Georgia actually achieved parity in terms of turnovers. Both sides had 7 apiece. I just wouldn't have expected that from South Africa. I would expect them to be dominant in that space. So I think just a little bit more concerted effort needs to go into hitting the breakdown quickly, because you guys are going to be going up against teams, obviously like the All Blacks, but even Australia, okay, who feast off turnovers and unstructured play. If we learned anything from the Wallabies' plucky but definitely outclassed performance against the Lions, is that they do have flashes of brilliance. You look at the try that Max Jorgensen got, plucking the ball out of the air, racing in for a try. These guys are opportunistic. The Aussies can smell a try. And I think they're at their most dangerous if you put up a kick without good kick chase, and the Aussies can attack from the backfield against an unstructured defense and maybe just catch the opposition surprise, catch them a bit on their heels in terms of hitting the breakdown. I think that the Boks can be punished by quick ruck ball, and you'll just need to stem that aspect of the game, because you're often the kings of this component of the game. So again, it's a surprisingly off-color aspect for South Africa. But I would say if you can stop hemorrhaging some of these turnovers that are quelling the attack, you're just going to go to a different level, and you could even romp through the Rugby Championship. So I think Rassie is going to be putting his laser focus on the breakdown as he preps for the Rugby Championship. But let's finish on a high here. What is the one area that I can say unambiguously South Africa's leading the way? Well, clearly it is depth. You just brought on 3 fearsome new front rowers. Clearly, a guy like Canan Moodie has done the unthinkable and now seems to be maybe the premier center. I mean, no one would have really thought, well, Jesse Creel's, on the way out potentially, but it just shows the depth coming through South Africa. You're stacked. You're really stacked in each position. I think your challenge now is just finding that best 23. There's a risk of over-rotating. I don't think it's happened yet. Rugby World Cup's still a long way away, which, of course, is the end game. But I think in this championship, and Rassie signaled as much, I do want to see you guys playing a fairly similar team week to week. And I think then you can call on the depth as needed, because injuries are inevitable in rugby. Knock on wood, we don't want any to happen, but it's just a fact of life in rugby. Then your depth can come into play. But I think you're in a good position where there's such competition now for spots. That is going to harden the frontliners. But you do need to know who your frontliners are. And I think you've had a good mixture of youth and experience throughout this series at home. And now you can kind of blend that together into a pretty cast iron starting team. But who do you think is going to be the first choice 10? I'm really curious about that. That's the position that always interests me about South Africa. Do you think Sasha Feinberg-Ngomazulu has it sewed up, even though it wasn't a good game? Do you go back to Andre Pollard? Do you like the attacking flair of Manie Lebok, even if he might not be sticking around South Africa permanently? Let me know your thoughts on 10. I think you know who your 9 is now. It's Grant Williams, and the backline's becoming pretty clear. Is there anyone who's caused a shake-up to the forward pack? I'd love to know your thoughts. Guys, please send this video to someone who loves rugby. Like, subscribe. And check out my coverage over the weekend. I've been going hard this weekend. I did an analysis of the Lions Wallabies, also the third French All Blacks game. So those are all on my channel. Check them out. And guys, I'll be back for another one real soon. Until then, love you lots. Take it easy. Bye for now.